assignment expired. Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just pick up on those last comments. I want to talk about a low point. How about Mr. Papadopoulos pled guilty, Mr. Manafort convicted, pled guilty to 2 other charges, Mr. Gates pled guilty, Mr. Flynn pled guilty, Mr. Pinedo pled guilty, Mr. Van der Zwaan pled guilty, Mr. Kalimnik indicted for obstruction of justice. And for 2 years, you want to talk about an agenda, my friends on the other side of the aisle refused to bring any of these people up before the committee. So today, for the first day, we have one witness who voluntarily is coming forward to testify. Your side ran away from the truth, and we're trying to bring it to the American people. So, Mr. Cohen, first of all, thank you for voluntarily coming before the committee to testify. I want to ask you about your statements regarding Trump Tower in Moscow, and I want to drill down some of the facts and details. Now, you may not be aware of it, but this goes back a ways. Back in 1987, Mr. Trump wrote that he had had ongoing discussions with Soviet officials back then to build a large luxury hotel across from Kremlin in partnership with the Soviet Union. So at that time, it was the Soviet Union. I want to ask you, in your filing with the special counsel Mueller's office, the prosecutors wrote, and I quote, Mr. Cohen discussed the status and progress of the Moscow project with Individual 1 on more than the 3 occasions Mr. Cohen claimed to the committee, and he briefed family members of Individual 1 with the company about the project. I know this is redundant, but Mr. Cohen, who are we referring to here when we refer to Individual 1?
Donald J. Trump.
Okay, and the company?
The Trump Organization.
Okay.
Through a subsidiary.
Okay. And who were the family members that you briefed on the Trump Tower Moscow project?
Don Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump.
Okay. Now, were these in the regular course of business, or did the president or family request the briefings?
This is the regular course of business.
Do you recall, there's a question on the number of briefings. Do you recall how many there might have been?
I'm sorry, sir?
Do you recall how many of these briefings there might have been?
Approximately 10 in total.
All right. In your written remarks, you also wrote, and I quote, there were at least a half dozen times between the Iowa caucus in January 2016 and the end of June when Mr. Trump would ask me, how's it going in Russia, referring to the Russia Moscow Tower project. Now, how did the president communicate those questions to you? Was it verbally or on the phone?
Verbally, most of the time, or virtually all of the time. It would. He would say to me, Michael, come walk with me. He was heading to, let's say, a rally, to a car, and as I would walk him to the elevator, he would ask me questions quickly regarding a series of
Could there be any
issues.
doubt about what he was referring to in terms of the project in Russia?
No, this would be it.
Okay.
Otherwise, there would have been no reason to ask it of me.
Right, right. You also wrote, and I quote, to be clear, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it, close quote. How did the president actually direct the negotiations? What details did he direct?
Well, after each communication that I had, I would report back to him, and our goal was to get this project. We were interested in building what would have been the largest building in all of Europe. Sir, I just if I can say one last thing in regard to the gentleman's statement, since this is on topic. The lies that I told to Congress, in fairness, benefited Mr. Trump. It was in furtherance of my protection of Mr. Trump, which I stated in my testimony. And I am not protecting Mr. Trump anymore. And so, while I truly appreciate taking some of your time onto it, to attack me every single time about taxes, I have no credibility. It's for exactly that reason that I spent the last week searching boxes in order to find the information that I did, so that you don't have to take my word for it. I don't want you to. I want you to look at the documents,
Mr. Cohen,
and I want you to make your own decision.
I need my last 10
Sorry, sir.
That's okay. let me just say, I don't think my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are afraid that you're going to lie. I think they're afraid you're going to tell the truth.
Thank you, sir.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gosar.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Oh, I appreciate the gentleman for yielding. I just want to respond to Mr. Lynch. I want you to think about this. When have you ever seen a federal agency where this has happened? James Comey, director, fired. Andy McCabe, deputy director, fired. Lied 3 times under oath, under investigation, right, as we speak. Jim Baker, FBI counsel, demoted, then left, currently under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Connecticut. Lisa Page, demoted, then left. Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence, demoted, then fired. That's what happened. That's what we're concerned about. And today we actually asked for Rod Rosenstein. Oh, by the way, we now know 3 people have told us Rod Rosenstein actually was contemplating using the 25th Amendment to remove the guy from presidency who the American people put there. And we asked for him to be a witness today, and the chairman said no. And instead we get 30 minutes from a guy who's going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. Mr. Cohen, I got 2 quick questions before I yield back to my colleague. Mr. Heiss asked you who all you've talked to. You said you spoke to Mr. Schiff. Obviously, you spoke to Mr. Cummings. You're going in front of both committees. You're here today. You're going to be in front of Mr. Schiff's committee tomorrow. Have you spoken to Chairman Nadler or anyone on his staff, or have any of your attorneys spoken to Chairman Nadler?
I don't know about my attorneys. I have not spoken to.
You don't know if your attorneys have spoken?
I have not spoken to Congressman Nadler, and I'm not aware, sir. I'm not aware if my attorneys. I can ask them.
Can turn around and ask him.
The answer, sir, is no.
Okay. And you said at this present time, Mr. Davis is not getting paid. Does that are you anticipating him receiving some kind of compensation in the future?
When I start to earn a living,
He's going to wait 3 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
The answer is yes.
That's a first. I've never known a lawyer wait 3 years to get paid.
I guess he thinks it's important.
All right. With that, I yield to the gentleman from Arizona.
Well, thank you. Mr. Cohen, you know, you're a disgraced lawyer. I mean, you've been disbarred. And so I'm sure you remember, well, maybe you don't remember, duty of confidentiality, attorney-client privilege. I think the gentleman over your right side actually understands that very, very well and wouldn't do what you are doing here today. So let's go back at this credibility. You want us to make sure that we think of you as a real philanthropic icon, that you're about justice, that you're the person that somebody would call at 3 o'clock in the morning. No, they wouldn't. Not at all. When you saw Mr. Comer dissect you, right in front of this committee, you conflicted your testimony, sir. You're a pathological liar. You don't know truth from falsehood.
Sir, I'm sorry. Are you referring to me or the president?
Hey, this is my time.
Are you referring to me, sir, or the president?
When I ask you a question,
yes.
I'll ask for an answer.
Sure.
Now, are you familiar with Rule 35 of the Federal Rules and Criminal Procedures?
I am now.
Oh. So the committee understands that you've been in contact with the Southern District of New York. Is that true?
I am in constant contact with the Southern District of New York regarding ongoing investigations.
And part of that application is to reduce sentencing time, is it not? Yes.
There is a possibility.
Yes. The answer is yes.
No, it's not, sir.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's
not.
And so testimony here could actually help you out in getting your sentence lessened. Isn't that true?
I'm not really sure how my appearance here today is providing substantial information that the Southern District can use for the creation of a case. Now, if there is something that this group can do for me, I would gladly welcome it.
Well, I got to tell you, you know, America's watching you. I've been getting texts right and left saying, how can anybody listen to this pathological person? He's got a problem. He doesn't know fact from fiction. And that's what's sad here, is that you didn't do this for Donald Trump, to protect Donald Trump. You did it for you. This is all about you. This is all about this Twitter feed and let me read one of those, another one. Women who love and support Michael Cohen, strong, pit bull, sex symbol, no nonsense, business oriented, and ready to make a difference.
1,000 followers.
Ready to make a difference against the law. That's pretty sad. You know, over and over again, you know, we want to have trust. It's built on the premise that we're truthful, that we come forward. But there's no truth with you whatsoever. That's why that's important to you, to look up here and look at the old adage that our moms taught us. Liar, liar, pants on fire. No one should ever listen to you and give you credibility. It's sad. It's sad that we have come. In fact, I want to quote the chairman's very words. This is a real, hold on.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Sad state.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. gov't.
Mr. Cohen, several times in your testimony, you state the bad things that you did for Mr. Trump. And at some point, you apparently changed your course of action. There's a recurring refrain in your testimony that says, and yet I continued to work for him. But at some point you changed. What was the breaking point at which you decided to start telling the truth?
There are several factors. Helsinki, Charlottesville, watching the daily destruction of our civility to one another, putting up silly things like this.
Oh, that's silly.
Really unbecoming of Congress. It's that sort of behavior that I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for your silliness because I did the same thing that you're doing now for 10 years. I protected Mr. Trump for 10 years. And the fact that you pull up a news article that has no value to it, and you want to use that as the premise for discrediting me, that I'm not the person that people called at 3 o'clock in the morning, would make you inaccurate. In actuality, it would make you a liar, which puts you into the same position that I am in. And I can only warn people, the more people that follow Mr. Trump, as I did blindly, are going to suffer the same consequences that I'm suffering.
What warning would you give young people who are tempted, as you were? Would you encourage them not to wait 10 years to see the light? What advice would you give young people, in particular young lawyers, so they do not abuse their bar license as you did?
Look at what's happened to me. I had a wonderful life. I have a beautiful wife. I have 2 amazing children. I achieved financial success by the age of 39. I didn't go to work for Mr. Trump because I had to. I went to work for him because I wanted to. And I've lost it all. So if I'm not a picture perfect, that's the picture that should be up there. If I'm not a picture perfect example of what not to do, that's the example that I'm trying to set for my children. You make mistakes in life, and I've owned them, and I've taken responsibility for them. And I'm paying a huge price, as is my family. So if that in and of itself isn't enough to dissuade somebody from acting in the callous manner that I did, I'm not sure that that person has any chance, very much like I'm in right now.
A recurring theme in your testimony is concern for your family's safety. What specifically are you most concerned about?
Well, the president, unlike my Cohen for Trump that has 1,000 followers, he's got over 60 million people. And when Mr. Trump turned around early in the campaign and said, I can shoot somebody on 5th Avenue and get away with it, I want to be very clear. He's not joking. He's telling you the truth. You see, you don't know him. I do. I sat next to this man for 10 years, and I watched his back. I'm the one who started the campaign. And I'm the one who continued in 2015 to promote him. And so many things I thought that he can do that are just great. And he can, and he is doing things that are great. But this destruction of our civility to one another is just, it's out of control. And when he goes on Twitter and he starts bringing in my in-laws, my parents, my wife, what does he think is going to happen? He's sending out the same message that he can do whatever he wants. This is his country. He's becoming an autocrat. And hopefully something bad will happen to me and my children and my wife so that I will not be here and testify. That's what his hope was. It was to intimidate me. And again, I thanked everybody who joined and said that this is just not right.
Have you ever seen Mr. Trump personally threaten people with physical harm?
No. He would use others.
He would hire other people to do that?
I'm not so sure that he had to hire them. They were already working there. Everybody's job at the Trump Organization is to protect Mr. Trump. Every day, most of us knew we were coming in and we were going to lie for him on something. And that became the norm. And that's exactly what's happening right now in this country. And it's exactly what's happening here in government, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired.
Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a break?
Not right now.
Okay. All right.
I did, sir. So that's okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, it's been going on now for more than 2 hours, a very, very explosive hearing before the House Oversight Committee. We've been hearing from Michael Cohen. Jake, this is as expected. The Republicans are ganging up on him. He's trying to defend himself. The Democrats seem to be defending him. This is going to continue. It's very explosive. I suspect it's going to become even more explosive.
Yeah, the Democrats, not surprisingly, are using this as a way to try to attack President Trump, taking largely, I would say, his testimony at face value and assuming it's true, even though, as has been pointed out several times from across the aisle, Michael Cohen has pleaded guilty and is going to prison partly because he lied to Congress previously. So Democrats focusing on the way to attack Trump, and Republicans almost exclusively using their time to attack Michael Cohen, attacking his credibility, specifically because of the lies. Of course, Michael Cohen got in a shot at President Trump. Somebody said something to him about all of the lies, and he said, "Are you talking about me or President Trump?" President Trump has long been established by many fact checkers, not exactly allegiant to the truth himself, although, as far as I know, never convicted of lying to the FBI or to Congress.
Dan, some very, very explosive charges he's leveling against the President of the United States.
That's right. Effectively, bank fraud by saying to Deutsche Bank that his net worth is more than, according to Michael Cohen, who says he knows these things, than it was. Fraud against, just generally against the American people. Maybe fraud is the wrong word. I'll let Jeffrey Toobin and the lawyers over there use what is correct. But again and again and again, as much as and as aggressive as Michael Cohen has tried to be in saying, you know, mea culpa, I realize I'm not the perfect messenger, the Republicans have continued to help him with that in an even more aggressive manner. And the one potential problem that I thought Michael Cohen has is when he was asked if he wanted a job in the White House, and he said no. Our reporting, I know, Pam, you've been told, I've been told, all of us, by people in and around the process, real time. He very much wanted a job in the White House, very much. And I'll just say one other thing that he said specifically.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second just to show that clip that I think a lot of us here raised our eyebrows because we knew it to not be true. Take a listen.
How long did you work in the White House?
I never worked in the White House.
That's the point, isn't it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not, sir.
You wanted to work in the White House.
No, sir.
You didn't get brought to the dance.
Sir.
And now?
I was extremely proud to be personal attorney to the President of the United States of America. I did not want to go to the White House. I was offered jobs. I can tell you a story of Mr. Trump reaming out Reince Priebus because I had not taken a job where Mr. Trump wanted me to, which is working with Don McGahn at the White House General Counsel's office.
And I think the issue there is that one sentence, I did not want to go to the White House. All of our reporting suggests that's not true.
And let me just tell you that after he said that, I reached out to Reince Priebus. I spoke to him, and his comment was no comment. He said, I'm not getting involved in this. But I can just say, and we all, of course, witnessed this real time, that this president, probably more than any other, if he wants somebody in the White House, they're there. You know, Reince Priebus and John Kelly probably didn't want Omarosa to be working in the White House and other people, but they were there because the president wanted it to be so. So if Michael Cohen and the president really wanted it to happen, more importantly, the president, it would have happened, and he wanted it.
Jeffrey.
I am struck by the breathtaking incompetence of the questioning. I mean, this endless bloviating and not actually getting any information out of the witness. A couple of times, there were some facts disclosed. I thought it was very interesting that he talked a little bit about how the Stormy Daniels payment took shape, and he mentioned that Alan Weisselberg was deeply involved in that.
The CFO of the Trump organization.
CFO of the Trump organization. And of course, that the president was involved at every step in that process, which, of course, the president has denied. The other thing I thought was interesting, Congressman Clay, it came up, that he says he submitted knowingly false financial statements to Deutsche Bank in order to get a loan to buy the Buffalo Bills. That loan was never given. They never bought the Buffalo Bills. But if he did knowingly submit a financial statement that was false, that's a crime in and of itself. So that, I bet, pricked up the ears of prosecutors out and about.
And speaking of questions that I wish had been followed up, and there were several, I found it striking that I think it was Congresswoman Maloney, but I might be mistaken, asked about any other hush money payments made to any other individuals. Yep. And Cohen said something along the lines of, I'd have to think about that, which I find a little hard to believe, given that this has been his life, and I'm sure he's been thinking about it for quite some time. And she kind of just let that go. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, that's the answer I would have liked to hear as well. The other answers I kept thinking about is, what exactly did he answer under oath to Mueller, and how does that line up with some of these questions? Because I think for the legal jeopardy for the president, those are the only sworn statements he made, so I'm very curious about how that may come to light.
Do you think Cohen knows what Trump said under oath to Mueller?
I think probably not.
I would think not.
Yeah, so it's a little hard to get at that, but I think that counts a lot. And, overall, the tenor here is using the old strategy of use a thief to catch a thief. So that's what's going on here, and both sides are trying to use that strategy.
And I think so much of what was so incredible heading into today was we knew that Michael Cohen, in large part, was going to be restating things that have already been reported on, particularly on an issue like the Stormy Daniels payments and the hush payments. This has been so thoroughly reported, but the incredible thing about today is that we are seeing him say these things in public for the first time.
Seeing the check.
And he very much went into the details of the inner workings of the Trump organization. And as all of you know really well, there is a theory in Washington among people who know President Trump very well that the thing that keeps him up at night more than anything else, perhaps maybe even more than the Russia investigation, is the scrutiny on his business and the Trump organization. And there was one point that was so fascinating where Michael Cohen described in great detail the conversations that he had with Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump organization. And he said at one point, he said, well, why don't you pay for it? And Weisselberg said, no, I don't want to use my money. And so they brainstormed different ways of using the business, including seeing if someone wants to host a party at one of the Trump clubs and using that as a hush payment, or seeing if someone wants a membership at the golf club. That raises a lot of questions about the Trump organization.
I want to bring in another congressional witness testifying against the president, except it was quite some time ago. John Dean, the former White House counsel for President Nixon and the CNN contributor, joins us now. And probably there is nobody more expert on commenting on Michael Cohen and how he's doing, his credibility or lack thereof, and the questions than you, Mr. Dean. What have you made of it so far?
Well, I think he's been very forthright. He has been taken a lot of contrition, and his mea culpa has been excellent. I would have opted that he, after 10 years, might have had a longer prepared statement, could have laid out some of the facts. But I think those will come out during the course of the day if the members keep probing. I find him a good witness at this point.
What do you make of how partisan it has been, especially compared to when you testified before the House, and the quality of the questions?
I testified before both the House and the Senate. The Senate Watergate Committee was the first to launch, and it was very interesting. They seemed very unpartisan when the cameras were on, but yet it was a catfight when the cameras were off. So the Republicans did their fighting to try to mess it up as best they could. behind closed doors, then would come out and say, well, we all agree that we're going to go forward because they were outvoted. I was not surprised at what happened this morning. I'm sure Michael was not surprised. They obviously are not happy with this witness. This is a witness that can cause the president trouble, and they want to try to do everything they can to discredit him and discredit the proceedings.
Listen, John, this is Wolf Blitzer. Listen to this exchange that occurred earlier. Listen to this.
Because Mr. Dean, last night on a cable news network, actually made it all very evident. John Dean, and I'll quote, Mr. Chairman, he said, as a former committee counsel in the House Judiciary Committee and then a long-term witness, sitting alone at the table is important. Quote, holding your statement as long as you can so the other side can't chew it up is important as well, close quote. And so it was advice that our witness got for this particular body. And Mr. Chairman, when you were in the minority, you wouldn't have stood for it. And I can tell you that we should not stand for it as a body.
Hi, John. That was Mark Meadows, the Republican congressman from North Carolina, the head of the Tea Party. What's your reaction to what he said?
Wolf, I think I gave pretty good gratuitous advice that Michael could hold that statement as long as he could so they couldn't chew it up and sit alone at the table. And otherwise, they would probably had Lanny Davis under oath by now. They've done a lot of focusing on him. And this isn't the day to do that. This is a day for Michael to put his statement out, and they can do that another time. Those are just the normal pyrotechnics of a minority desperate to bollocks up a hearing.
Have you been consulting with Michael Cohen and Lanny Davis over the course of these past several months?
I've never spoken with Michael. I've known Lanny for many, many years. We first met when we were anchor buddies during the Clinton impeachment proceedings.
All right, John Dean, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate your expertise. Let's go to Capitol Hill now and talk to our Capitol Hill reporter, Manu Raju, who is in the room. Manu, tell us what we're not seeing on camera. Tell us about how the members of Congress are interacting.
Well, the Republicans are essentially trying to troll Michael Cohen. They've actually put several posters in the room to show those Women for Cohen tweets, putting up there, essentially making fun of him of sorts, saying that people view him as those tweets that, of course, were praising him. Those, of course, became a part of the back and forth. The Republicans have been very eager to try to go after Michael Cohen. They've been frustrated by the chairman's decision to, they were saying, limit the testimony to not focus on other issues beyond the ones that he laid out in his initial scope of this hearing. But what was interesting at the beginning of this hearing was Elijah Cummings that said that virtually all the topics can be discussed, Russia investigation and the like. But nevertheless, the Republicans were eager to try to criticize Cummings and also go after Cohen's credibility. But coming out of this hearing, I can tell you Democrats feel pretty good about where things stand right now, and they expect a lot more fireworks for the rest of the course of this day.
Michael Cohen is back in this hearing room. You see Lanny Davis, his lawyer, right in front of him right now. Elijah Cummings, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, getting ready to convene this session. They've been going on. It's been going since 10 o'clock this morning. About a third, I'm guessing, about a third of the 42 members of the House Oversight Committee have already had a chance to ask questions, 5 minutes each. This is going to continue now for several more hours.
And while we wait for it to gavel back in, John King, let me just ask you quickly. You've heard Republicans really take shots at. Oh, never mind. Let's listen back in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, you have admitted to lying on your taxes. According to federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, you also lied to banks to get loans. The prosecutors wrote, quote, to secure loans, Cohen falsely understated the amount of debt he was carrying and omitted information for his personal financial statements to induce a bank to lend based on incomplete information, end quote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You lied on financial documents. So you lied to financial institutions in order to secure loans. So we've established that you lie on your taxes, you lie to banks, and you have been convicted of lying to Congress. It seems to me that there's not much that you won't lie about when you stand to gain from it. In fact, the prosecutors for the Southern District of New York noted that each of your crimes, quote, bear a common sense of characteristics which each involving deception and being motivated by your personal greed and ambition. Is your appearance here today motivated by your desire to remain in the spotlight for your personal benefit?
No, ma'am.
You have sought out ways to rehabilitate your image, from tax evader, bank swindler, and all-around liar to an honorable, truthful man by appearing before cable news. I'm concerned you could be using your story and this congressional platform for your personal benefit, such as a desire to make money from book deals. So can you commit under oath that you have not and will not pursue a book or movie deal based on your experiences working for the president?
No.
You cannot commit to making money off of a book or movie deal based on your work?
No. There's two parts to your question. The first part of your question, you asked me whether or not I had spoken to people regarding a possible book deal. And I have. And I've spoken to people who have sought me out regarding a movie deal.
No, I didn't ask you if you'd
That was
spoken
the
to
first part of your
anybody.
question.
I said, can you commit under oath that you will not, that you have not and will not pursue a book deal?
And I would not do that, no.
Okay. Can you commit under oath that you will not pursue opportunities to provide commentary for a major news network based on your experiences working for the president?
No.
Can you commit under oath that you will not pursue political office in the state of New York?
No.
So you don't commit to changing your ways, basically, because you want to continue to use your background as a liar, a cheater, a convicted liar to make money. That's what you want to do.
And that's going to get me a book deal and a movie deal and television and a spot on television? I don't think so.
Well, it appears that it will. I yield my time, remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Jordan.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Mr. Cohen, in your sentencing statement to the court in December of last year, you said, I want to apologize to the people of the United States. You deserve to know the truth. Approximately a month later, BuzzFeed News ran a story that was the story in the country for a couple days. BuzzFeed story ran January 17th, 2019. On January 18th, your counsel went on TV and wouldn't confirm or deny the story. The next day, the special counsel's office did something that's never happened. Never happened. They said the description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and the characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. Why didn't your lawyer, the day that he's on TV, when this story is the biggest thing in the news in the country, why didn't he deny the BuzzFeed story?
Because I didn't think it was his responsibility to do that. We are not the fact checkers for BuzzFeed.
He's on TV to talk about the very story you committed to the courts when you were trying to get your sentence reduced, that the American people deserve to know the truth. You had the golden opportunity to give them the truth on a false story, the BuzzFeed story, and your lawyer didn't say a thing. He actually said this, I can't confirm, I can't deny. You had an opportunity to do exactly what you told the judge you were going to do 1 month after you said it, and you didn't do it. Why not?
Again, it wasn't our responsibility to be the fact checker for the news agencies.
This is the biggest story in the country.
Sir, please let me. The president says so far approximately 9,000.
I got 8 seconds. I got 8 seconds. I'll let you finish.
Chairman, may I please
finish? The special counsel
Chairman, can I please finish?
Something they've never done. They said that story was false. Now you can respond.
Okay. My response. The president has told something over 9,000 lies to date. Do I ask Mr. Davis or Mr. Monaco, or do I go on television in order to correct his mistakes?
When Mr. Davis goes on to talk about that specific subject,
the answer is no. And I would like to
gentleman's time has listen up. The gentleman's time has expired. You may finish answering the question, and then we're going to go to Mr. Connolly.
All I wanted to say is I just find it interesting, sir, that between yourself and your colleagues, that not one question so far since I'm here has been asked about President Trump. That's actually why I thought I was coming today. Not to confess the mistakes that I've made. I've already done that. And I'll do it again every time you ask me about taxes or mistakes. Yes, I made my mistakes. I'll say it now again. And I'm going to pay the ultimate price. But I'm not here today, and the American people don't care about my taxes. They want to know what it is that I know about Mr. Trump. And not one question so far has been asked about Mr. Trump.
Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Cohen, based on your testimony and your 10-year experience, I think you can recognize the behavior you're being subjected to on the other side of the aisle. Discredit, slander, use any trick in the book to prevent your testimony from sticking. The idea that a witness would come to us who's flawed, and you certainly are flawed, means they can never tell the truth, and there is no validity whatsoever to a single word they say, would discredit every single criminal trial of organized crime in the history of the United States, because all of them depend on someone who's turned. It would make RICO null and void. We couldn't use it anymore. This Congress historically has relied on all kinds of shady figures who turned. One of the most famous who led to the decapitation of the organized crime families in America, Joe Valachi, congressional hearing. He was a witness, and he committed a lot worse crimes than you're convicted of, Mr. Cohen. So don't be fooled by what my friends on the other side of the aisle are trying to do today. It is do everything but focus on the principle, known as individual number one in the Southern District of New York, as I recall. Is that correct, Mr. Cohen?
That is correct.
Now, Mr. Cohen, I want to ask you about something that's not in your testimony and that so far has not been made public. In our committee staff search of documents provided by the White House that were otherwise redacted or already in the public, and I guess the White House thought that was funny, they made one mistake, the White House. There was an email from a special assistant to the president to a deputy White House counsel, and the email is dated May 16th, 2017, and it says, and I quote, POTUS, meaning the president, requested a meeting on Thursday with Michael Cohen and Jay Sekulow. Any idea what this might be about? End quote. Do you recall being asked to come to the White House on or around that time? With Mr. Sekulow? May of 2017.
Off the top of my head, sir, I don't. I recall being in the White House with Jay Sekulow, and it was in regard to the documents, the document production, as well as my appearance before the House Select Intel. But I'm not sure if that's specifically what you're referring. But what I will do is I will check all my records, and I'm more than happy to provide you with any documentation or a response to this question.
Well, that's you sort of touch on presumably the purpose of the discussion, at least among others. This meeting occurred just before your testimony before the Select Committee on Intelligence here in the House. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Was that a topic of conversation with the President himself?
If this is the specific instance that I was there with Mr. Sekulow, yes.
So you had a conversation with the President of the United States about your impending testimony before the House Intelligence Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was the nature of that conversation?
He wanted me to cooperate. He also wanted just to ensure, by making the statement, and I said it in my testimony, there is no Russia, there is no collusion, there is no deal. He goes, it's all a witch hunt, and he goes, this stuff has to end.
Did you take those comments to be suggestive of what might flavor your testimony?
Sir, he's been saying that to me for many, many months. And at the end of the day, I knew exactly what he wanted me to say.
And why was Mr. Sekulow in the meeting?
Because he was going to be representing Mr. Trump going forward as one of his personal attorneys in this matter.
So it was sort of a handoff meeting.
Correct.
In any way, final question, did the president in any way, from your point of view, coach you in terms of how to respond to questions or the content of your testimony before a House committee?
Again, it's a difficult answer because he doesn't tell you what he wants. What he does is, again, Michael, there's no Russia, there's no collusion, there's no involvement, there's no interference. I know what he means because I've been around him for so long. So if you're asking me whether or not that's the message, that's staying on point, that's the party line that he created, that so many others are now touting, yes, that's the message that he wanted to reinforce.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Mr. Massey.
Mr. Cohen, can you just clarify, did you say that at times you would do what you thought Mr. Trump wanted you to do, not specifically what he told you to do?
At times, yes.
So you just went on your intuition?
I don't know if I would call it intuition as much as I would just say my knowledge of what he wanted, because it happened before, and I knew what he had wanted.
Does a lawyer have a duty to provide his client with good legal advice?
Yes.
Were you a good lawyer to Mr. Trump?
I believe so.
When you arranged a payment to Ms. Clifford, you say in your testimony, I'm going to quote from your testimony, that you did so, quote, without bothering to consider whether that was improper, much less whether it was the right thing to do. You said that, unquote. That's your testimony today. You said you didn't even consider whether it was legal. How could you give your client legal advice when you're not even considering whether it's legal?
I did what I knew Mr. Trump wanted. This conversation with Mr. Trump started.
I didn't ask whether you're a good fixer. I asked whether you were a good lawyer.
Sometimes you have to melt both together. I needed to, at that time, ensure and protect Mr. Trump. And if I put my, which I'm clearly suffering the penalty of, I clearly erred on the side of wrong.
So you feel like without bothering to consider whether it was proper, much less whether it was the right thing to do, by ignoring any conscience, if you have one, that you were protecting Mr. Trump?
I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand.
You feel that was how to protect? As his lawyer, you feel that you did a good job. You said you were a good lawyer, right?
That's
Is that
correct.
being a good lawyer? To not even consider whether it's legal or not?
I didn't work for the campaign. I was working and I was trying to protect Mr. Trump. I sat with Mr. Trump, and this goes back all the way to 2011. This wasn't the first scenario with Ms. Daniels.
Let's go back then.
So my point is, this was an ongoing situation. It didn't just start in October. Sir, please, you have to let me finish.
Well,
it didn't start in October.
Let me ask
it started
you
many
on that.
years earlier.
When were you disbarred?
Yesterday, from what I read in the paper.
Yesterday. When should you have been disbarred, based on the legal counsel you were giving your client?
I don't have an answer for your question.
How long were you counsel for Mr. Trump?
Since 2007.
When is the first time you gave him bad legal advice or failed to inform him of his legal obligations, as you testified today you did in the case of the payment to Ms. Clifford? When was the first time you did that? Would that qualify for disbarment?
I don't know, sir. I'm not the Bar Association.
I think you should consult with them maybe occasionally on some of these things.
Well, there's no point now. I lost my law license.
Has anybody else promised to pay Mr. Davis for representing you?
No.
Nobody has?
No. Are you offering?
Question, quickly. You said and this is also in your testimony, in the days before the Democratic Convention, you became privy to a conversation that some of Hillary Clinton's emails would be leaked. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Was that in, you said late July? Do you know the exact day?
I believe it was either the 18th or the 19th, and I would guess that it would be on the 19th.
But it was definitely July.
I believe so, yes.
Do you know that was public knowledge in June? This was Mr. Assange, and I'd like to submit this, unanimous consent to submit this for the record.
Without objection, so.
Mr. Assange reported to the media on June 12th that those emails would be leaked. So I'm not saying you have fake news, I'm saying you have old news, and there's really not much to that. I would like to yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cohen, I'm quoting you because I can earlier said, I spent last week looking through boxes to find documents that would support your accusations. Where are those boxes, good sir? Where are those boxes? Are they in your garage? Or?
They're in the storage.
And are these not boxes that should have been turned over to investigative authorities during the many criminal investigations you've been subject to?
Sir, these are the boxes that were returned to me
If
post the raid.
they include data pertinent to crimes that you've committed, should they not have been turned over and remanded to investigative authority? Did Mr. Lanny Davis know of these boxes?
The gentleman's time has expired. You may answer the question.
I don't understand his question, sir.
Very well. Mr. Christian Morsi.
Mr. Cohen.